Hi, I'm Mike Yawn, a solutions architect with Hazelcast, with our second episode of HazelVision. In our first episode, I walked through the process of installing Hazelcast to a local development system. Today, let's look at an alternate way to develop using Hazelcast, using the Hazelcast Cloud Managed Service. Hazelcast Cloud is available in a starter edition, a multi-tenant setup great for development or smaller production workloads, and an enterprise edition, which is great for larger production workloads. Today, we'll use the starter edition, and specifically what we call Cloud Basic, which is a free tier of starter edition with limited storage capacity. Let's start by signing up for a free account. Browse to cloud.hazelcast.com and you'll see we have a few sign-in options. If it's your first time here, click on Create an Account. Fill in the requested information and hit Create Account. Once we've submitted our registration info, we'll receive an email like this one. We just need to click to verify that we used a valid email, and that'll take us back to complete the sign-up process. Once we've logged in, we're at the Cloud Console page. We can manage our account here, access the docs, or communicate with the support team. But more interestingly, we can create a new cluster. Our cluster is going to need the following information. We need to give it a name, select a cloud provider. For Starter Edition, we can only select AWS. The region, again, for the Enterprise offers us a lot of choices here in Starter Edition, just a few. The cluster size, we can do a free cluster up to 200 megabytes, so let's go with that. The software version, let's stay with the latest. Whether or not we want to enable encryption, that's a good idea, so let's do it. And whether we want to use an IP whitelist to limit what IP addresses connect to our cluster. I don't expect anybody but myself to be connecting, so I'm going to add my own IP address here as the whitelist. I don't need any custom configuration, so I can just create the cluster. The cluster creation process takes a bit more than a minute, which I've edited out. Hazelcast Cloud is always used in a client-server manner, so to access our cluster, we're going to need a client. For any serious work, we're going to write our own custom client code, but to get us up and running quickly, Hazelcast Cloud will generate a simple client for us. As you can see, we can have clients generated in a number of popular languages. I'm going to go with Java. And I can just click here to download the client, and it'll put it on my laptop wherever I store downloads. The generated client zip file was downloaded to my downloads directory, where I've unzipped it into a working directory. We see that our download includes several files related to encryption, which are needed for SSL communication between the client and the cluster. It's worth noting that for the on-premise Hazelcast software, you have to be an enterprise user to get encryption. It's not part of the open source product. But all versions of Hazelcast Cloud, even the free tier of the Starter Edition, use the enterprise version of the server software. So we get encryption communication, assuming we selected that option when we built our cluster, which we did. The client's a Maven project, and we get Maven also as part of our download. So there's nothing more that we need to install in order to get running here. I can open up a terminal window. And then when we downloaded our client, the software here gave us the command that we need to build it. So I can copy that to my clipboard, come back over to my terminal window, paste that in, hit return. It will now build the client software and then begin running it. It connects to our cluster. We see here we have a single member cluster, and it outputs the map size as it adds data into the cluster. While our client is running, we can open another window here and look at the generated code and see that it's really quite simple. The Cloud Discovery token is unique for our cluster. That and the cluster name are all we need to connect to an unencrypted cluster. For a secured cluster like ours, we also need these fields for the key store and trust store. And then once we've configured, then we can just get a new client, connect, and then start writing data into the map. So very simple for production. You could keep this connection information the same and just replace this random data with your actual application usage. Now it's time for cluster facts. The main takeaway here is that with an investment of about 5 minutes, you can put on your LinkedIn profile that you have experience building and deploying cloud native Kubernetes applications. The software is the full enterprise version of Hazelcast, and it's just as easy to get started with the cloud deployment as it was to get started with an on-premise deployment like we saw in episode 1. As always, thanks for watching, and drop me a note if you have suggestions for topics you'd like to see covered in future HazelVision episodes.